Hola, bienvenidos! In today's video, we're going to talk about the uses of por. Now, you may have learned of other pairs of things in Spanish in the past. For example, when you learned SER and ESTAR, which both mean to be, but you use them in different circumstances. Or perhaps you've seen SABER and CONOCER, which both mean to know, but again, they're used in different situations. For example, SABER is used for more facts and information, things you can memorize and just know off the top of your head, versus CONOCER is more like to be familiar with, you've heard of something. Well, por and para work that way too. So today's video, we're going to look at just por and the uses that go along with it. So por and para basically are for, but as we're going to see with por, the meaning can change a little bit based on the use. So let's take a look. I'm a big fan of acronyms to help remember when to use different verbs or different items like por and para, for example. So I didn't invent this acronym, but it's a really helpful one that I find useful for when to use por. And of course, we'll look at each of these individually, but basically the entire acronym is I'm attracted more, and each of the letters stands for a different use of por. So we've got idiomatic expression, motion, apology, thanks, transport or communication, reason or cause, amount of time or an amount of distance, cost or value, to be accomplished, exchange or substitution, disposition, mood, and favor, mistaken identity, on behalf of, rate and measurement, and errand. You'll see that some of these have some overlap, but that's okay. It's just that this acronym happens to be really specific, and I find it helpful to keep straight the uses of por. Idiomatic expression. Basically, that's just a fancy way of saying that these are set expressions that always use por, just because of what the set expression is. It's not really per se like what they mean necessarily. It's just this expression has to use por. It's just set up that way. So there's a whole list here. So things like por Dios, for heaven's sake, por encima, hastily, por entero, entirely, por escrito, in writing. Por ejemplo, I added because that's a really common one. For example, por eso, for that reason. Por lo general, as a general rule. Por lo menos, at least. Por lo tanto, consequently. Por supuesto, of course. And por vez. So, and you would have a number in between here to say for the number time. So for the 5th time, 6th time, whatever. These are all idiomatic expressions. They're just set phrases that use por in them. They don't change. Kind of grouped in here too as well. Just be aware that some verbs are followed by por. So I've included a list here of the common ones. So like, for example, preocuparse por, to worry about. That por gets you the about at the end. So just be aware that those exist also. The ones I've underlined in blue are ones that we definitely see a lot in my classes, but of course there are others, so just be aware that these are idiomatic expressions. On to M for motion. So por can be translated as by, around, through, or along. So these are all motion words. So for example, nos gustaría viajar por España. Por here means around. We would like to travel around Spain. So we're giving like almost a general location. It's not really being very specific. It's just a motion. We're going all around Spain. So again, por in this case, when it's a motion, by, around, through, or along. Attracted. Our first A is apology. So anytime you're saying, oh, I'm sorry for, and then something. So in this case, perdón por la interrupción. Sorry for the interruption. Similarly, to give thanks. So gracias por el regalo. Thank you for the gift. Then this next one, anytime you say how someone got somewhere, what type of transportation they went, like by train, by car, or how they communicated, so like by email, by telephone, that's going to use por as well. So for example, mi amigo me llama por teléfono los lunes. My friend calls me by phone on Mondays. Voy a la escuela por autobús. I go to school by bus. Now this is an interesting one. So anytime you want to give the reason or cause for something, that uses por. Now you may remember back when you learned para in isolated instances that you can't conjugate after it. Por works the same way. So you'll notice that the verb directly after por here is in its infinitive form. It's not conjugated. So, por ser muy nervioso, no le gusta contestar preguntas en clase. This is sort of like saying due to. So, due to being very nervous, he or she doesn't like to answer questions in class. So, we're giving the reason as to why this person does not enjoy answering questions out loud. Por ser, due to being. So, in English, it would be an ing. In Spanish, we keep it in the infinitive form when it's right side by side with por. If we want to give the amount of time something happens or an amount for a distance, so how long something goes, then we would use por as well. So, for example, estudié por 2 horas ayer. I studied for 2 hours yesterday. Manejé por 20 millas anoche. I drove for 20 miles last night. When you talk about the cost of something or its value, what you would have to pay in order to get this item, you would use por as well. So, puedes comprar el libro por 20 pesos. You can buy the book for 20 pesos. Any instance that's really any type of exchange, that's going to use por, and cost or value is one of those things. To be accomplished. That means something hasn't been done yet. So, hay todavía muchos proyectos por completar. Again, notice that we have a verb right after por, so because of that, we cannot conjugate this verb. It has to stay in infinitive. There's still a lot of projects yet to be done. They need to be finished still. Exchange or substitution. Sustituya pronombres por los nombres. Substitute pronouns for the names. So remember I mentioned just a minute ago that exchange is using por. Anytime we trade items, something for one item for another, well, that's por. We also use por to express our dispositions or things like we are in favor of or that we support, if you want to think about it that way. So mood here is a little misleading. Don't think anytime you see some sort of emotion that, oh boy, it's going to be por. Not necessarily the case. It's more to do with how your values align with things. So like, I'm 100% for this law. In English would be an example of something that would use por. So think about it as in what you support. So for example, siento gran admiración por ese autor. I feel great admiration for that author. So in a way, you're saying you support the author. You really think they're something wonderful. Anunció que la colectividad se unirá al reclamo por el sí. And I took this from a Univision article. So she announced that the group will join the strategy for yes. So this was from a quote talking about Puerto Rican statehood. And in this article, this person was saying that they were going to join the side that was saying, yes, Puerto Rico should become a state. So they're supporting this side of the cause. That's their disposition in the situation, and they're in favor of yes, so that's why it's por here. So think about this sort of use of por is more like what you support. And then we've got mistaken identity. So thinking someone was something, but they're not. So for example, me tienen por loco. They took me for a crazy person, but you're actually not. Now here we have another type of exchange. So far we've seen cost or value is essentially an exchange, like because money, what you pay for something, is an exchange for the item. We've seen actual exchange, substitute the pronouns, or the nouns rather, with pronouns. This is another type of exchange in a way, on behalf of. So someone would say, let's say, usually do something, but someone else is going to do it on their behalf. That's kind of an exchange. So trabajé por Anita porque está enferma. I worked for, or think of it on behalf of Anita because she is sick. So you were kind enough to take her shift because she wasn't able to do so. Or you might see something like trabajé por los pobres, like I worked on behalf of the poor, like you're doing your work so it benefits them. A little matemáticas here, rate or measurement. So when we use a rate or measurement, we're going to use por as well. So for example, 5 times 5 is 25. In Español, we would say 5 por 5 son 25. And lastly, errand. Here we mean the object of an errand, as in why did you go on the errand? What was your end goal? What were you going to get out of that errand? For example, if I don't have any milk and I need to go to the supermarket and I go to the supermarket for milk, that would be an example here. So fui al mercado por unas piñas. So I went to the market for some pineapples. So again, anytime you talk about why you went somewhere, what you got there, the object of the errand, that's going to need por. So what we just went over was a breakdown of this acronym. Again, not mine originally, but I really enjoy it for uses of por. So when to use por. Again, por can mean for, but it can mean other things as well based upon what you're using it as. So for example, idiomatic expression, those will all vary because they're the exact phrase, like por lo general. They're just set phrases that have to use por. We've got motion. Here it'll mean by, around, along, through. Apology, thanks. Transportation or communication. Here it'll mean by, like by bus or by telephone. Reason or cause. This will more or less translate to due to, and then some sort of action. Amount of time or distance, cost or value, to be accomplished, like yet to be done. Exchange or substitution. Disposition, remember we said that this one is really about what you support, what you back, what you're in favor of. Then when we get over to our last word, more, mistaken identity, on behalf of. Remember the example was a friend is sick, so you take their shift at work. Rate or measurement, and the object of an errand. So why did you go on the errand? What were you trying to get? Those are the big uses of por that we see in Spanish. So I'm attracted more. And of course you see that some overlap. There's a lot of examples that are basically a type of exchange. For example, cost and value, on behalf of, in a way. The other thing I just want to mention quickly is that passive voice, when you want to say by, also uses por in Spanish, if you've covered that. Passive voice in English is when you flip the sentence. So active voice is when you have a clear defined subject. So something like, I wrote the book. Versus, my example here, the book was written by her. By flipping the sentence, you're almost making the person that's doing the writing less important. So in this passive voice version, el libro fue escrito por ella. To get that by, we use por and then the person. So that's one other item that you should just be aware of grammatically that could show up. And here we are. Thank you for watching this little video on the uses of por. Again, work with that acronym. Practice it. When you see por in context, try to figure out, okay, what use of por is this from I'm attracted more? And then as you get better and better, you'll just know, oh, por is here. Por goes here. And this will become very easy for you. But again, practice makes it easier. Gracias, buena suerte y nos vemos.